right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. The conversation starts right now. The state of the nation. We're talking about the accountability question. President William Ruto's third year in office. The members who we have here as our guests run institutions whose members are expected to entrench and uphold the highest code of ethics and integrity. But are they empowered enough to act when there's something off? That is the conversation we're having, and my guests are with me in studio. And let me start from my immediate right. Professor Noura Mohammed is the Director General, Kenya School of Government. Thank you for making time. Next to him is FCPA Hesbon Omolo, Council Member ISPAC, that is the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya. Thank you very much for making time. Next to him is Kenneth Matiba, CEO KISM. KISM is the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. Thank you very much for making time. And next is Honorable Caleb Amisi, Member of Parliament for Saboti and also the Vice Chair PIC. Thank you very much for making time. And Matiba, I'll start with you on this. You know, you run an institution and all the procurement officers are under you as the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. For corruption to happen, there has to be a procurement officer who is involved. So what have you done as a professional body to tame corruption and instill the code of ethics in your members?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Trevor, first of all, for this opportunity, and thank you very much for giving the supply chain profession a platform to engage on this critical topic around accountability. So the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management, as you understand, is the national professional body for procurement and supply chain professionals in the country. We have a mandate to register, license, train, discipline, and regulate supply chain professionals. Looking at that mandate and the nexus with the fight against corruption, I think what we first need to look at is whether we have tried to create professional sanity. You can only be able to create professional sanity when you're able to register and license professionals as required. And over the past 1 year, we have been able to grow our membership by nearly 78%. Up to about 28,000 members from 22,000 members the year before. But to create now impact when it comes to the fight against corruption, we have tried to now operationalize a robust framework working with the judiciary that encapsulates disciplinary action from only two cases in about 17 years. In the past 1 year, we have been able to handle over 150 cases of professional misconduct. And we have also been able to tie up by entering into a memorandum of cooperation with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission so that then we can be able to be deliberate in our interventions around ethics and integrity programs. As a consequence of that, we today run a very robust ethics and integrity program with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which has trained over 500 procurement and supply chain professionals. And if you look at the National Ethics and Anti-Corruption Survey report of 2024, we have seen positive impact among the professionals that are traditionally ranked to be top tiers when it comes to graft issues. You can be able to see from that report that this year, procurement professionals were not ranked. So we are creating impact, albeit slow, but we are putting concerted efforts, also working with sister institutions like the Kenya School of Government. We just recently, about 2 weeks ago, signed a memorandum of understanding to roll out another ethics and integrity program that is going to be mandatory for supply chain professionals. Yeah. So moving forward, I think there's a lot of work to be done. Yeah. But we are also riding on the goodwill, and we really appreciate the supply chain professionals in the country because they're really embracing matters of ethics and integrity.
Yeah, Matiba, you talk about creating professional sanity, but at one point, CEO, it was reported that nearly 40% of your procurement officers are quacks. How then do you fight corruption when nearly half of your team are quacks?
I think you need to distinguish between what a quack, if that term exists, means vis-a-vis the fight against corruption. When you're talking about quacks, then I think it is an issue around professional standing, whether they're duly registered and licensed as required by law. As to whether they engage in corruption or other things is a different issue. And I think what supply chain professionals have been suffering from is the negative stereotyping. And I think where that is arising from is when we did, for the first time, compliance checks in public entities, around 109 entities, targeting about 1,600 supply chain professionals, and it was determined that a number of them were not duly licensed as required.
Okay.
And I want to report positive progress, because out of those compliance checks and compliance audits, we have now seen a positive translation of about 80% of supply chain professionals being compliant as required. So what we are looking at, Trevor, is a solution-centric approach and a collaborative approach when it comes to the fight against corruption. It cannot be that the problem is the supply chain professionals.
Okay.
We exist in a web of accountability.
Okay.
And as such, supply chain professionals are ready to work with other actors within and outside government to proffer solutions when it comes to the fight against corruption.
All right. Omolo, again, yours is also another one, Institute of Certified Public Account Kenya. So in every chain of corruption, an accountant is also involved. How are the accountants empowered to contribute to the fight against corruption?
Thank you, Trevor. As far as ISPAC is concerned, we regulate the accountancy profession, and you realize that in our membership we have over 35,000 accountants across the country, and those who work in both public sector and private sector are well guided around their ethical conduct. We have a disciplinary process, part of our responsibility to ensure that where cases of misconduct are reported to us, we take disciplinary action. We have a statutory committee that is guided and is able to address all those cases. We know there have been several cases of professional misconduct which have been reported. We have had very bad audit reports across the country, and these financial reports are prepared by our members. As a first step, we did write to all accounting officers to just give us their explanation why such audit reports are being churned out by them, and we are in the process of just sifting through and guiding where there's need for certain legal reforms. We'll be able to guide. But we're also offering capacity building programs to our members, training them on what is right, driving ethical conduct in the practice of their work on a consistent basis. We have cross collaboration with other bodies such as EACC, just to drive the fight against graft and mismanagement of public resources. We are also trying to engage with the Kenya School of Government to ensure that the trainings are tailor-made to address some of the gaps that have been identified in the public space. And of course, as ISPAC, moral leadership is very key to us, and therefore our code of ethics is strictly implemented. Where we find gaps, like I've said earlier, we are able to step in and address. But where there are also legal gaps, which we've noticed from time to time, there's a lot of changes, then we are also working very closely with National Treasury, which is our mother ministry, to try and amend the Accountants Act to address some of those gaps that are hindering the fight against graft. And even more recently now, we've come up with a very robust tool, which will be soon rolling out, where every audit opinion that is issued out there must be logged to a professional, and there are authentication processes through which we can weed out what you're mentioning about quacks. Because in our midst, and even through this the parliamentary committees that Mheshimiwa and the likes, you read from the Senate committees, accountants signing reports, and when you ask which is your membership number, they are not even professionals. So we are trying to address those kind of gaps. But even now, more importantly, we've gone a step further as part of advocacy. In Senate, we now have a liaison person that supports the Senate Public Accounts Committees. When they look at the county financial reports, they're able to give the perspective of ISPAC, and where our members within those spaces are found to have done things that are not right, we quickly refer them to a disciplinary mechanism.
Okay, Prof, let me bring you in on this. You know, when people talk about the Kenya School of Government, that is where all the trainings happen. And everybody wonders, do this training really even convert? And what strategies are you putting in place, like the Kenya School of Government, to ensure that the current government public service entrench values, ethics, and integrity? And it's not just a workshop where they come, get trained, and nothing happens.
Thank you so much. Trevor. Again, Kenya School of Government was established by Act of Parliament. And the very mandate of the Kenya School of Government is to contribute to the public service transformation through training, research, consultancy, and advice in the government. By that, therefore, then, we are supposed to build the competency of public service to be effective, efficient, transformative, progressive, and also responsive and citizen-centered in all the things that we do. For quite a while, Kenya School of Government, in fact, Trevor, it is important to know that we will be celebrating our 100 years in November this year, that for quite a while, our focus has been a very specific, individualized kind of a training, where if it is finance and accounts, we are focusing on PFM, nothing else. If it is supply chain management, it's more of supply chain management. The whole issue of public procurement, asset disposal act, and so on and so forth. And all this we've been doing not in collaboration, but again as Kenya School of Government. For the past 2-3 years, what we are doing is a collaborative, the whole of government approach in terms of, again, dealing with the capacity building framework in the public sector. One of the things that we did for the past 2 years is to reach out to the professional associations such as KISIM, ICIPAC, the other professional bodies, for us to co-create and develop a program that will then ultimately transform the public sector. As part of also the collaboration, we recently, Trevor, developed a public service governance, ethics, and integrity transformational program whose very hallmark is the roadmap to the culture change in the public sector.
Yeah.
Talking of principles, Trevor, principles, talking of values, values are principles or a standard of behavior. For us to change the behavior in the public sector, therefore then the culture plays a very critical role. And that is why, in collaboration with Office of Head of Public Service, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the National Treasury, Council of Governors, and quite a number of other institutions, we developed this high-level transformative program that will address the Article 10, Article 232, also 73, Article 73, which clearly says that all public servants are supposed to bring honor to the nation and dignity to the office, focusing on the hallmark of leadership competency. And again, Trevor, let me add and say that we are also in the process of establishing a center of excellence called Leadership Competency Assessment Center of Excellence, where then we are not just building the capacity, we are also assessing the competency of the leaders as they come in through what we call emotional intelligence and psychometric assessment that then will give us holistic reflection of the leader that you must be. And then we will be developing program to toward the realization of the gaps that we have now seen. And finally, we are also closely working with Public Service Commission on the values report, where we are now reviewing the values report to identify some of the gaps so that then we develop a program to realize the public sector transformation in Kenya.
All right, Honorable BC, what are we missing here as a country? Because the institutions that are sitting here have all professional bodies, but there's still not much of a change we're seeing.
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. In fact, it is quite unfortunate that you had to put me with these fine gentlemen, professionals. I wish you could have brought me Mbadi himself. Because these are just victims of circulars and memos. Yeah. And I don't want to put them in a defense position. But nevertheless, we have to speak to the nation. And, Trevor, the constitutional order that we have, the history we've gone through as humankind, it dates back, even from the Roman Catholic leadership, the end of the 30 years of war between the Protestant and the Catholic. Even in the religious setup, there were anarchy and there was contestations. And we had a constitutional order that came in the form of Westphalia Treaty of 1648 that now put the end to these wars. And we gained the sovereignty order that we enjoy now. Kenya, as well, had also a constrained past. And we put ourselves in 2010 constitutional order to solve some of these issues that was a cause of chaos and anarchy all over, whether we call in the public sector, political space, we gave ourselves a constitution. Trevor, what bothers Kenyans is that why a constitution is not followed. We have what we call the Public Procurement and the Disposal Act, Assets Disposal Act, that came out of the Article 227 of our Constitution, that procurement must be fair, procurement must be competitive, procurement must be transparent. It is there. It is in the Constitution. Then you wonder why on earth a cabinet minister will have to put this as subservient and they put a circular as the order and the decree that we are supposed to use, and they put our Public Procurement Act aside and they start following cabinet circulars. The Constitution never envisaged a point where cabinet memos and the cabinet circulars and the regulations will overrule what is regulated by our Constitution. That is point number one. Secondly, when you put up systems, the way the EGP systems has come up, when you look at the history of Kenya, the more you centralize things, the more you centralize corruption. Just like Professor said, corruption in this country is beyond regulations and the legislation. Corruption has become a culture, that you have to change the culture of how people think about use of public funds. It is no longer about making laws and decrees and sending public officers helter-skelter all over, trying to implement what has been put overnight. It is a culture of the nation. Corruption has existed in other jurisdictions. How did China handle corruption? How did Singapore handle corruption? How did the ASEAN countries that were at par with Kenya in the last few decades handle corruption? How does Japan handle corruption? How does US, where we borrowed this constitution heavily, handle corruption? Kenya does not exist in a vacuum. We have other jurisdictions across the world. We can borrow and say, this is how corruption has been handled. You've seen the e-citizen, which was a centralized system. What has happened? We are saying that e-system funds have been disappeared. So the more you centralize things in a system and digitalize, the more you are centralizing corruption. And that's why Kenyans are asking, what makes you believe that this procurement officer at the lower level is lesser or is a more corrupt person than the person at the treasury, who is going to hold, who is just going to have a button away the whole country, systems away. He can actually suspend procurement and suspend payment at his will.
Yeah, but there are also those who ask you, what makes you think this procurement officer is more corrupt than those in the National Assembly who have budgeted corruption? Because the budget process is in the National Assembly.
And that's also another misplaced perception about budget process. National Assembly does not make the budget of this country. National Assembly only appropriate budgets. The budget of the nation is prepared by the executive. The ministries put their budget policy statements to the National Treasury. The National Treasury decides which amount of money a Minister of Transport will get, which amount of money a Minister of Education will get. What comes to Parliament is appropriation, that within the Ministry of Education, what goes to TVET, what goes to early learning. Within the Ministry of Transport, what goes to Kura, what goes to Kera, what goes to Kenha. So the whole misconception of the National Assembly making budget, it is what Kenyans are saying, but you are at the House, when you complain as a member of Parliament, Kenyans are saying you are a budget-making process. It is not. Parliament is not a budget-making process.
You can't raise any queries about the budget. That is
you cannot raise, you can only appropriate budgets, and that's why you have an appropriation bill.
We have seen Parliament also cut down budgets on different allocations.
Yeah,
this is not happening.
Within the ministries that are, that's why we have departmental committees.
Exactly.
If we have departmental committee in agriculture, it only deals with the budget of Minister of Agriculture. So you cannot take money from agriculture and put to transport. No. You are a cartel.
You can raise queries on
You
that.
can raise queries. That is
this allocation is proportionate to what is supposed to be done.
Yes, absolutely. And exactly what the budget committee needs to do. It needs to harmonize. While the committees of the departmental committees of various ministries have put forth their budget. The budget committee, actually the accusation is not with the rest of the committees. The accusation is a budget committee, because the budget committee that has the power to regulate between one ministry to the other. So it is not the entire parliament.
Okay.
You actually be specific. In fact, the next meeting we should have here is the chairman of budget committee. That's where we need to ask him questions.
All right. I saw Esbon shaking his head. Do you feel that the members of parliament are trying to deviate and run away from this responsibility of budget-making process?
I think I would look at it in the broader sense. I think the members of parliament are part of the budget-making process. The budget policy statement comes as early as August. That ends up with the parliamentary approval. All the way to those estimates, you have departmental, sectoral conversations. And you're able to know, if you have conversations with even these parastatal heads, how do they secure certain vote heads? There are conversations with the parliamentary committees. And the reality is, corruption in the budget cycle begins at that early stage. So by the time then you have the approval in parliament, there is no way Parliament runs away, because at every stage there is an approval process they're part of. Ultimately, the product that goes out there, they're even able to adjust one or two things. I know there's a committee in Parliament that deals with that, but that is still part of Parliament, because for the general public here, we cannot start isolating segments of Parliament. And therefore, I would put it to Mheshimiwa. The overall construct of even our public debt challenge has fingerprints of Parliament, because even that Parliament appropriates the CDF component of what then goes to their constituencies, which is a percentage of the budget. So it is true that when you look at our gaps, including our deficits in the budget, Parliament has voice and power to limit the budget deficit. Because if a government comes into power and says, this is the budget deficit we are going to work with, 3 or 5% of the GDP, then you have 1.2, 1.3 trillion gap. The revenue raising measures are giving you about 2.5 or 2.6 trillion, but the overall budget is 4.3. The envelope is big. It means there's a space for borrowing. So in 10 years, when you ask, why are we having a 10 trillion public debt? The MPs will say, we are wondering why this government has borrowed heavily. And you sit in parliament for 10 years. You've created a deficit every year of 1 trillion. That is 10 trillion. It's no rocket science. So we all have a responsibility. Yes, the executive will propose, but they will have to take it to Parliament. Parliament is not devoid of voice. So I think that is the first thing I would want to put across. But then, Trevor, allow me to flip it then a bit. Because the issues of EGP, which I know the CS Treasury has given guidelines, and there are timelines on implementation. And that has caused a loss of rancor. The courts have pronounced themselves that the approach is bad. The idea is very good, but the approach. But then let's also ask ourselves, if a country can go for 7-8 years discussing EGP, transitioning to a procurement process that is transparent, that is visible. Let's look at and we are talking about accountability here. What are the tenets of Article 10? It talks about integrity in these processes. If a procurement process is going to allow graft of about 300-400 billion to be cut out or be made visible, I know Mheshimiwa says it's centralizing things, but even in the e-citizen, yes, there are issues is raised correctly that must be addressed. But what has this brought with that centralization of revenue collection? The revenue collection under e-citizen has gone up the roof. So yes, stealing has gone on, which needs to be curbed, but the revenue collection under that system has actually mopped up resources that were disappearing at the local level here, where somebody would just give you those receipts that are not correctly reconciled. So I think technology helps us a lot. We need to appreciate only that. We must also implement it in a manner that is consistent with the law, like Mheshimiwa says. So there's nothing that stops the CS for Treasury planning effectively When you say you are going to roll out EGP in July, you said that in November last year. What has been your preparation over the last 6-7 months?
Okay. That
people then are feeling ambushed last minute. But I would want to believe that is a noble thing. We just need to address the teething challenges of that transition.
All right, we'll touch on this in just a bit. Let me take a quick commercial break. I'll be back with this. And I know also Matiba has to say something about this, and also Mweshimiwa. We're back in a short while. Let's take a quick commercial break. We're continuing the accountability question. How does it work? What is the best way of approaching it? The guests you see here and some of the biggest institutions whose members are supposed to uphold the ethics and integrity code. Are they? It's a question we're talking about. Let's see in a short while.